I got jolted awake at 7 in the morning by somebody pounding on my front door like they were there to deliver a warrant, and for one half-asleep second I thought somebody had died. Then I peeked through the blinds and saw Karen red-faced, sweating, dragging a bright orange extension cord across 3 front lawns like she was leading some deranged suburban invasion. That was the exact moment I realized my coffee was not going to help me nearly enough. She was standing in my driveway in slippers and workout clothes, huffing like she'd just climbed a mountain, yelling that my car charger was community property and she had every right to power up her hybrid whenever she pleased. I just stood there, blinking, mug in hand, hair a mess, trying to decide whether I was still dreaming or whether this woman had finally gone fully off the rails. And the worst part was she looked completely serious. One hand on her hip, the other gripping that extension cord like it was a legal document. She demanded I open my garage immediately. By then, 2 neighbors were already outside in bathrobes, and one of them had his phone up recording because of course he did. Now, if you've ever lived near somebody like Karen, then you know this type. Every tiny inconvenience becomes a moral crusade. Every personal boundary becomes in her mind a civil rights issue. The day before, everything had been normal. I came home from work, parked my car, plugged it into the charger I paid to install with my own money, and went inside to eat dinner with my wife. We'd put solar panels on the house the year before, and after the cost of installation, the permits, all of that, we were finally seeing real savings. To us it was simple. We made an investment. It paid off, end of story. But to Karen, apparently me charging my own car in my own garage was some kind of offense against the neighborhood. She had already stopped me twice that week to ask why I thought I deserved free electricity when everybody else had to pay for fuel. I explained politely that nothing about it was free. I paid for the panels, I paid for the charger, I paid for the electrical work, and I still paid a utility bill. She waved that away like facts were rude. She started talking about shared resources and community fairness, and I honestly thought it was just one of those things people say when they want to complain without understanding what they're complaining about. Then there she was at daybreak, dragging that ridiculous cord toward my garage like she had come to claim territory. I stepped outside in pajama pants, and before I could even speak, she launched into this speech about the HOA bylaws. She had a highlighted copy in her hand, bright pink marker all over it, jabbing at one line like she had uncovered buried treasure. According to Karen, a clause about the HOA maintaining streetlights and drainage somehow proved that electricity itself was a communal right. I looked at the page, looked back at her, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek not to laugh in her face. I pointed out that she was reading it wrong. She planted both fists on her hips and told me I was using technical language to deny her access. Then she tried to guilt me, saying she was only trying to help the environment by charging her hybrid. Mind you, that thing mostly went from her driveway to the salon and back, but sure saved the planet, Karen. By then, more neighbors had drifted over, drawn by the noise, and you could feel that weird buzz in the air, half irritation, half entertainment. Karen actually tried to maneuver her SUV closer to my garage, and in the process she nearly rolled over my wife's flower bed. She held that cord out like a sword and told me to do my civic duty. I said no. Calmly, clearly, one syllable, just no. She stomped her foot like a child and said she'd fine me. I reminded her she wasn't the whole board, just one loud member. She snapped back that she practically was the board. That got a laugh from the crowd, which made her even madder. Then she turned to the neighbors and started putting on a full performance, telling them I was selfish, that I thought I was better than everyone else, that I was hoarding electricity like some kind of suburban warlord. One neighbor leaned over and muttered, "This feels like bad cable TV," and honestly, he wasn't wrong. My wife came out then, calm as ever, coffee in hand, and asked Karen why she was waking up the whole street. Karen changed tone so fast it almost gave me whiplash. Suddenly, she was sweet, reasonable, just trying to have a discussion about community energy sharing. My wife looked at the extension cord stretched across half the block and said, "Does that look like a discussion to you?" People laughed, some even clapped, and Karen stormed off shouting that we'd all regret this at the emergency HOA meeting she was calling that very night. And yes, she actually did it. By evening, flyers were on everybody's doors. Big bold letters. Emergency meeting. Like we were dealing with flooding or a break-in or a gas leak, not one woman trying to plug her car into somebody else's garage. The next night, the clubhouse was packed, mostly because everyone knew Karen was about to embarrass herself and nobody wanted to miss it. She stood at the front with a stack of papers and a smile that said she thought she was giving the speech of her life. She started talking about fairness, equality, green energy, the future of the neighborhood. Then she pulled out poster-sized photos of my car in my driveway and held them up like exhibits in a criminal trial. I'm not kidding. She had enlarged pictures of my car like it was evidence of social injustice. I sat near the back taking notes because with people like Karen, records matter. My wife raised her hand and asked if Karen had given even 1 second of thought to safety. Karen said she had done her research online, which got a ripple of laughter around the room. Then she made her big proposal that every electric or hybrid vehicle owner in the neighborhood should have access to my charger whenever needed, and that I should cover the cost since I had already taken the first step. Silence. Just dead silence. A couple of her usual allies half raised their hands, then looked around and thought better of it. The board president, who was usually so conflict avoidant, he made wallpaper look bold, cleared his throat, and said my charger was private property and not subject to shared use. Karen's whole face tightened. That was the moment I knew she was going to get worse before she got better. 2 days later, a neighbor texted me a photo of Karen crouched near my garage wall while I was at work. Then my wife caught her trying to run some cheap adapter from an outdoor outlet. She claimed the cord had fallen into the socket by accident, which was such an insult to human intelligence, I didn't even know how to answer it. That night, I found scuff marks near the charger and decided I was done being patient. I installed cameras, quiet ones, good ones. Best money I spent that month. A few nights later, the garage lights flickered while I was reading in the living room. I ran out there and found Karen half inside my garage holding a weird knockoff adapter that looked like it came free with a bad decision. She froze when she saw me, then said she was conducting an inspection. An inspection. On my property. With smoke already curling out of the outlet. I yelled for her to step back, cut the breaker, and my wife snapped photos while Karen coughed dramatically and somehow still managed to blame me for not labeling my equipment better. The next morning, that camera footage had made its way around the neighborhood. Quietly, privately, person to person. The woman spent years making everybody miserable, and now everybody had front row seats to her nearly setting herself on fire in my garage. People started calling her Sparky behind her back. I'm not proud I laughed, but I laughed. You'd think public humiliation would slow a person down. Not Karen. It just made her dig in deeper. She started stuffing mailboxes with flyers about energy fairness. She walked around with a clipboard asking people to sign a petition for access to my garage. She made up fake statistics. She told people 90% of the neighborhood supported her. That number changed depending on who she was talking to, which should tell you all you need to know. Around then, my wife invited a licensed electrician over to inspect the outlet Karen had damaged. A few neighbors gathered while he explained in plain English why plugging random vehicles into somebody else's setup with cheap adapters was dangerous. He even showed them where the outlet had been scorched. And here comes the twist, because Karen had been lurking nearby the whole time just waiting. She stormed over and accused the electrician of being on my payroll, then said science has been wrong before. The man just blinked at her, looked at me, and muttered, "You can't outwire stupid." That line spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Not long after that, Karen tried her boldest stunt yet. I was in the backyard grilling when I heard this strange humming from the garage. I ran in and found her SUV nosed halfway up my driveway with some ridiculous splitter device jammed into my charger. It looked like a pile of wires and duct tape had gotten drunk and built itself. Karen was behind the wheel grinning like she'd just won a court case. Then sparks flew. Her headlights flashed. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, then went black. There was a loud pop, a hard chemical smell, and smoke started creeping out from under the hood. She jumped out screaming that I had sabotaged her car. My neighbor from across the street, who had apparently learned to keep his phone ready at all times, was already recording. That should have been the rock bottom. It was not. At the next HOA meeting, she cried. Literally cried, and said she was being oppressed by private charging stations. She accused me of booby-trapping my own equipment. She said my footage was fake, the electrician was fake, and modern technology was ruining America. It would have been funny if there hadn't been this darker thing underneath it, that point where somebody's need to be right gets stronger than their common sense. She started telling people my charger wasn't properly permitted. I showed the paperwork. She told people inspectors were coming. They didn't. She kept circling my house, muttering, taking notes, staring at the garage like it had personally insulted her ancestors. Then came the Saturday that ended it. I got back from the hardware store and smelled burnt plastic before I even reached the porch. Sharp, bitter, ugly. I rounded the driveway and there she was again, half on my property, clutching another mangled cord, her SUV crooked near the garage, smoke curling from the front end. Sparks were snapping against the wall outlet. She was panicking but still yelling that it was all my fault. I cut the breaker. My wife called the fire department. Sirens rolled in within minutes and suddenly my yard was full of a sheriff's deputy, a fire marshal, 2 code inspectors, and half the neighborhood standing back like they'd bought tickets. Karen tried the same speech, the same righteous tone, the same highlighted HOA papers. Only this time it died fast. The fire marshal looked at the outlet, looked at the melted cord in her hand and said plain as day that she had caused the damage herself. The code inspector said the HOA had zero authority over my private electrical installation. Then the deputy asked if I had security footage. I handed him a USB drive because by then I had learned. He watched Karen and the shady electrician she'd hired sneaking onto my property late at night, tools in hand trying to splice into my charger line. You could actually see the guy back away right before the wiring failed. He bolted the second the car started smoking. Left her there. That was the part that changed the whole room. Suddenly she wasn't just pushy. She was reckless, dangerous, willing to burn down half the block to win an argument. The deputy cited her for trespassing, tampering, and reckless endangerment. The HOA met the next evening, and for once there was no drama about procedure, no hand-wringing, no fake neutrality. The board president laid out the facts, the footage was played, the room gasped and laughed in all the right places, and then the board voted. Unanimous. Her proposal was dead, she was fined hard, and she was removed from her position on the board. Just like that. The woman who had strutted around like she owned the neighborhood sat there with her jaw tight and her pearls shaking, while everybody else finally stopped pretending she was just misunderstood. A week later, her SUV was towed off, battery fried beyond repair. I had a steel lockbox installed around my charger motion sensors too. Not because I thought she still had one last move left in her, but because I was done underestimating crazy, wrapped in entitlement. And you know what I learned from all this? Some people don't want fairness. They want access to whatever you built, whatever you paid for, whatever you protected, and they'll call it selfishness when you say no. Boundaries offend the people who benefit from you not having any. The sweetest part came later. The neighborhood barbecue rolled around. Kids were drawing little chalk lightning bolts on the sidewalk. Grown adults were still quoting Karen's energy democracy speech in terrible dramatic voices, and for the first time in a long time, the whole block felt relaxed. Karen passed by with her head down. No speeches, no clipboard, no audience. Just silence. And I'll be honest, watching her walk past my locked charger without saying a word felt better than any apology ever could. So tell me this, when somebody keeps crossing the line and hiding behind rules they barely understand, where do you think justice ends and karma begins? And have you ever dealt with someone so entitled they'd rather destroy their own life than admit they were wrong? Share your take. And if you've lived through anything even close to this mess, I want to hear that too.